Late night lobby. Front row seats. Locked in. Here we go. Real quick, before we get into it, everything you're about to hear on this channel is commentary, opinion, and public record entertainment. Nothing in this script is a fact unless it's directly attributed and independently verified. We're not here to bully anybody, we're not here to hate on anybody, and we're not here to smear any celebrity, public figure, or private person named in this story. The talk is respectful, the reads are receipt-based, and the comments section is expected to stay just as clean. Everything we're about to unpack is drawn from public interviews, public live streams, public receipts, and public speculation floating around the internet. If it's not on the record, we're going to say so. If it's a read, we're going to call it a read. Cool. Cool. Now let's move. Okay, family, sit down for this one, because Cardi B just walked up to a live camera and said something she cannot walk back. And once you hear the sentence, you're going to understand why every industry executive, every tour promoter, every label lawyer, and every European booking agent from London to Amsterdam is currently sitting in a group chat trying to figure out what to do with her next. This is not a small moment. This is a career pivot dressed up as an Instagram live rant, and if you blink you'll miss the second half of it, because the second half is the part that changes everything. This is the moment historians of pop culture will circle in red pen 10 years from now when they try to explain how the biggest female rapper of her era pressed pause on her own coronation. This is the receipt that finishes the argument. This is the domino that knocks the entire row down. This is a career inflection dressed up as an Instagram monologue. I'll roll the tape. Then we talk. Then I'll show you what nobody else is telling you. Cardi B, on her own live stream, on her own phone, in her own words, told the entire internet that the European leg of the Little Miss Drama tour is not happening. She didn't say maybe. She didn't say we're still negotiating. She didn't say she's taking her time. She looked into the lens and told her fans, point blank, that she is not releasing the dates, she is not doing the run, and she believes she is worth more money than the offer that is currently on the table. She proved what she could do. She proved what she could make. And in her own words, she feels she deserves more. That's the sentence. That's the whole ballgame. Now, in plain terms, because I don't put words in anybody's mouth, she is telling us that whoever is behind the wheel of her touring contracts, whether that's her label, her promoter, her management, or the international routing team, is not offering her the number she wants. And instead of quietly declining the run and letting her people negotiate in the dark, she did the one thing artists are trained never to do. She took the fight public. She took it live. She took it to the very fans who spent their money on the first leg, and she basically told them the second leg is on ice because the check isn't big enough. And she did all of this with a camera on her face, a ring light in her eyes, and roughly 180,000 fans watching her leverage evaporate in real time. That is not a negotiating tactic. That is a distress signal dressed up as confidence. I'ma keep it 100. That is one of the boldest moves I have seen a rapper of her tier make in years. And I don't mean bold in the good way. I mean bold in the, you may have just cost yourself the next 5 years of your booking calendar, way. Bold in the, every promoter you'll ever pitch just heard your floor, way. Bold in the, your own manager is currently drafting a statement to walk this back, way. Let's boil it down. Cardi B had one arena run in the United States. 1. She's 10 years famous. 10. She's had one full-length album that dropped in the era before short-form video ate the industry, and one delayed, endlessly teased follow-up that finally arrived after fans had almost stopped asking. Now, the tour she just wrapped, the Little Miss Drama Tour, did numbers. That's not up for debate. She has one of the most rabid, front-row, screaming fanbases in the game, and every video I saw from that tour looked like a Cardi B concert should look. But between us and the walls, the tour also had moments. The stumbles. The redos. The on-stage fumbles that turned into meme cycles. The nights where the crowd sang louder than the artist did. The nights where the outfit got more airtime than the setlist. The clips where the choreography wobbled, wiped out, and washed the entire section of the show. And if you're the label crunching those numbers, you're not just looking at ticket revenue. You're looking at insurance premiums, production overrun, travel logistics, freight, backline, currency conversion, tax structuring, visa applications, and the risk-adjusted return of dragging that entire circus across an ocean during a slow year for US hip-hop in the European market. So when Cardi goes live and says, "I'm worth more," the industry hears something different than the fans hear. The fans hear a queen standing on business. The industry hears a red flag. Here's why. When you say, "I am worth more," on a live stream, you are not negotiating anymore. You are performing. You are broadcasting to every promoter in Europe that you rejected the number, and now every future promoter is going to price you accordingly. This is Booking 101. She just told every AEG, Live Nation, Melody VR, DEAG, and independent European festival buyer exactly what her floor is, and exactly where her ego sits. And they will remember that when the phone rings next time. And promoters in this business remember for years. Promoters carry grudges like Kanye carries loose USB drives. Nothing gets forgotten. Nothing gets forgiven. Every number that ever gets rejected on a live stream lives in a spreadsheet somewhere in a Rolodex of artists who are difficult to book. Now, before somebody says I'm being harsh, I'm not the one who said any of this. She said it. Out her own mouth. On her own platform. And that's the theme of this entire story, because the more Cardi talks, the more the receipts write themselves. She is her own worst press agent. She is her own worst opposition researcher. She is doing the work of every hater on the timeline for them, for free, on a Tuesday night, with a filter on. Roll the second clip. Then we finish the read. On the same live stream, Cardi B admits, again, her own words, that she has been avoiding the studio. She says she's been living her best life. She's been traveling. She's been doing daytime activities, because she doesn't like doing things during the day. She's been working, sort of. Somewhere. Not in the booth. She's out here securing her future, her words, not mine, but the future she's describing does not seem to involve the one job that made her famous in the first place. She rounds out the whole confession by saying that she has been ducking the studio because the studio requires her to sit down, calm down, think, and I quote, do so many things. Girly. The studio is your job. Sitting down, calming down, and thinking are the job. That's not a bug. That's the entire assignment. That's the description you signed up for the day you decided to be a rapper instead of a reality star. That's the fine print on the contract you inherited when the world crowned you the biggest female MC of your generation. She then, in this same clip, floats that she needs to do features. She's got a couple of girls she wants to work with. She's not going to name them. She's not going to schedule them. She's not going to lock a date. She's just going to gesture toward the possibility of a feature and hope the internet takes the hint. And I've been watching this exact dance for 4 straight months. Ever since the Little Miss Drama Tour wrapped, every appearance, every live stream, every red carpet, every podcast walk-in has followed the exact same script. The studio is coming, the album is coming, the features are coming, the European dates are coming, the collaboration is coming, the moment is coming. And when the moment gets here, the goalposts move. Again. Every single time. Reliably. Predictably. Almost artistically. If she ran a Broadway show it would be called The Postponement, and it would sell out for 18 months on the strength of the trailer alone. I've never in my life seen a superstar who has to be physically dragged, on record, into the room where the money is made. Now let me point blank tell you something the mainstream press is too polite to say. She is currently exhibiting the exact behavior we saw from her in the 7-year gap between her debut album and her sophomore album. She's chasing brand deals. She's doing small features. She's giving IG live confessionals in place of press runs. She's talking about touring instead of touring. She's referencing the studio instead of releasing from it. Cardi B is regressing into the version of herself that existed before the arena tour ever happened, and the arena tour was supposed to be the reset button that ended that era for good. The arena tour was supposed to close the debate. The arena tour was supposed to buy her another decade of runway. Instead, the arena tour has become the ceiling. And the ceiling is starting to feel low. Let me put it this way. If the tour was supposed to be the launch pad is smoking on the tarmac. And she is standing next to it on Instagram Live, complaining about the fuel bill. And this is where the second layer of the story matters, because she is not operating in a vacuum. She is operating in an industry that is quietly, and then not so quietly, deciding that the era of overpaying celebrities for name recognition alone is over. That era is buried. The brands are getting smarter. The promoters are getting sharper. The labels are looking at ROI spreadsheets that never used to exist. And the algorithm, the real king of this whole system, has been slowly, mathematically, elevating creators over celebrities for 3 years running. A TikTok girl with 800,000 followers can now outconvert a Grammy-winning rapper on a brand deal. A YouTube commentator with a mid-range subscriber count can now generate more engagement per post than a legacy pop star with 50 million. A Twitch streamer with a headset on can now do more branded revenue in a weekend than a 90s R&B legend can do in a quarter. That is not opinion. That is a Nielsen chart. That is a Media Kicks report. That is the entire reason your favorite legacy stars keep launching podcasts. The math has flipped. The gravity has changed. The house always wins, and the house is now the algorithm. The brands see that. The labels see that. The tour promoters absolutely see that. And every time a star of Cardi's tier goes live on Instagram and demands more money in public, the executives on the other side of that conversation are quietly typing into their group chats, "Why are we paying this much for this much ego?" And that is not a rhetorical question. That is a budget question. That is a next fiscal year question. That is a, "What does our roster look like in 18 months?" question. And when executives start asking that question about you, the answer usually arrives on a Wednesday morning in an email you don't want to open. I'm not saying that. They're saying that. I'm just relaying the temperature of the room. Now let's talk about the fans, because this is the part that stings if you've been rocking with Cardi B since Love and Hip Hop. The card heads, I'm talking the ride or die, front row, screaming, streaming, tweeting, defending her in every comment section fan base, they are the reason the Little Miss Drama tour sold out. They are the reason the album charted. They are the reason she is still culturally relevant after a decade of the messiest publicity cycles in rap. Those fans do not miss. They finance her. They fight for her. They meme for her. They defend her on every timeline. They spend real money on merch. They stream every deluxe, remix, sped up, slowed down version of every song. They fly across state lines. They buy the pit tickets. They screenshot the set lists. They arrive at 6 a.m. to catch a soundcheck they weren't invited to. And what did she just do to them? She went on Livestream, in front of her most loyal supporters, and told them the European dates they were promised are not coming, because the check isn't big enough. Not because she's tired. Not because she's protecting her mental health. Not because a family situation intervened. Not because the venues were unsafe. Not because the visas fell through. Not because a global tragedy interrupted the schedule. Because the check isn't big enough. Which, I want you to hear me on this, is a completely valid reason for any human being to turn down a job. But when you spent the last 12 months hyping international dates, when you were on the tour bus talking about the world stops, when you were in interviews telling fans overseas to hold on because you were coming, that is a promise. And that promise just got unpromised in public. In front of the very people who paid for the promise in the first place. There's a word for that. And you're not gonna like it. Nicki Minaj toured Europe. Megan Thee Stallion toured Europe. Latto has done international runs. Doja Cat has done international runs. Ice Spice has done international runs. Beyoncé, Rihanna, Missy Elliott, every single female rapper of significance has, at some point, put in the transatlantic work. And I'm not comparing Cardi to Beyoncé, because that comparison is a trap that only ends one way. But I will say this. The women she is often compared to have all done the run at some point in their career. She is the one still trying to figure out whether the run is worth her time. She is the outlier. She is the one who keeps announcing and then walking back. She is the one whose international tour dates function more as a hashtag than a schedule. That is not the flex she thinks it is. Now, is there a scenario where the label really is lowballing her? Absolutely. Labels lowball artists every single day of the week. That's the whole ecosystem. But labels also lowball for reasons. And the reasons usually have names. Reason number 1, the domestic tour did not gross what the internal projection said it would gross. Reason number 2, international insurance and production costs on a run this size would be astronomical, given the tour production, the security detail, and the recent stage incidents. Reason number 3, the European market for US hip-hop right now is not what it was in 2018. Reason number 4, the timing collides with several other female rap tours on the same circuit, and the promoters know they can pit the artists against each other for lower fees. Reason number 5, and this is the quiet one, Cardi has not released the kind of consistent, radio-dominant, streaming-dominant catalog required to justify a stadium-scale international premium. Reason number 6, and I hate to say it, the on-stage brand of Cardi B in 2026 is not the same on-stage brand of Cardi B in 2018, and the market has priced that in. Boil those 6 reasons down and you get one sentence. The math isn't matteing. That's the sentence executives whisper to each other when they don't want to say the loud thing out loud. The math isn't matteing. And when the math isn't matteing, the offer gets smaller. And when the offer gets smaller and the artist takes it public, the offer often disappears entirely, because now every other buyer in the market knows the artist's floor and the artist's ego at the same time. And once the math isn't matteing, no amount of live stream monologuing can put the numbers back on the whiteboard. Once the market decides you are a risk, the rate card gets rewritten in ink you can't erase. I have watched this movie before. So have you. So have the labels. So have the promoters. So has she, honestly, because she has been in this industry long enough to know exactly how this negotiation ends when you decide to fight it on Instagram. Now let me pivot to something even messier, because our girl is not the only voice in this story. Regardless of how anybody feels about Offset, her ex-husband has been on record, publicly, on his own platforms, describing the version of her that he says he lived with. He said she was chasing everything except her career. He used language a lot harsher than anything I'm going to repeat on this channel. And the internet dragged him for saying it. But sit with me for a second. When you strip away the tabloid noise and just look at what he claimed, and then you compare it to what she has said, on her own live stream, about avoiding the studio, avoiding the discipline, avoiding the sit-down think time, the picture doesn't disagree with itself. The picture agrees. Loudly. Uncomfortably. Repeatedly. I'm not co-signing Offset. I'm not vouching for Offset. Offset has his own list of things to answer for, and this isn't the video for that. But when the artist herself is publicly admitting she can't get in the booth, and the ex is publicly saying she was never in the booth, and the tour numbers were what they were, and the European leg is now dead in the water, there is a pattern here. And the pattern doesn't belong to the ex. The pattern belongs to her. Now let me get into the part that's really going to make some people big mad in the comments, because I promised you I wouldn't sugarcoat. Cardi B is at a career crossroads that most artists don't survive. She has burned through 3 separate release windows. She has burned through the goodwill of the mainstream press. She has burned through the patience of the fans who paid for the tour and are now watching the follow-up run get cancelled in real time. And she has now burned through the negotiating leverage that comes from being a quiet artist who lets her team fight for her behind the scenes. That is 4 separate fires. And she is still holding the match. She has one thing left. She has the music. If she walks into that studio next week, sits down, calms down, thinks, does the so many things she says she has to do, and comes out with a body of work that reminds the industry why she was ever the biggest female rapper in the world in the first place, the European leg comes back. The check comes back. The features come back. The brand deals come back. The narrative flips overnight. That is the ladder. That is always the ladder in this business. The music fixes the money. It has always fixed the money. It will always fix the money. Every comeback story in the history of hip-hop starts with the artist getting back in the booth and outworking their doubters. Not a single one has ever started with a live stream monologue about being underpaid. Not one. Not ever. Not in the history of this industry. If she doesn't, and I'm saying this with zero joy in my voice, then the trajectory we are watching is the trajectory of a superstar aging out of her own moment. And aging out doesn't mean growing old. Cardi is not old. She is in the physical prime of her career. Aging out in this industry means the culture moves faster than you do, and the algorithm stops feeding you the runway. It means the next generation stops treating your name as an aspirational reference and starts treating your name as a cautionary tale. It means the young female rappers who used to open for you now headline their own tours while you're still trying to schedule yours. And that would be a shame. Because Cardi B, at her peak, is one of the most magnetic performers this industry has produced in a generation. She has the personality. She has the wit. She has the loyalty from a fanbase that most artists would sell their publishing to build. What she does not currently have is the discipline to convert those assets into a second act. And discipline is not a bar. Discipline is not a punchline. Discipline is a schedule. Discipline is a calendar. Discipline is turning off the phone and getting in the room and doing the so many things the job requires. Discipline is the least glamorous ingredient in stardom, and it is the one nobody can outsource for you. Discipline is not sexy on camera. Discipline is not viral on the timeline. But discipline is the only thing that ever, in the entire history of this business, has separated a legacy artist from a legacy anecdote. I want you to notice something else about the live stream. She keeps insisting she's always working. She keeps insisting she's out here securing her future. She keeps insisting she's doing so much. But every time she catalogs the work is peripheral. Traveling. Daytime activities. Brand meetings. Content. Appearances. Interviews about interviews. Podcasts about podcasts. Selfies with security. Reposts of old freestyles. That is not a rapper's schedule. That is a lifestyle influencer's schedule. And there is a version of her who could pivot fully into that lane, become the Kim Kardashian of the hip-hop era, and print money that way for the next 30 years. But she does not seem ready to admit that lane is what she's actually building. She wants the rapper's crown while running the influencer's schedule. You can't wear 2 crowns. The head only fits one. And every day you try to wear both, one of them tilts. Now, the card heads are already typing. I see you. And listen, I love a loyal fanbase. But loyalty without accountability is worship, and worship doesn't help the artist grow. The most loyal thing a fan can do is tell the artist the truth. Tell the artist the studio matters. Tell the artist the European leg would have been the biggest career move of the decade. Tell the artist that, I feel I'm worth more, is a sentence you say to your manager in a phone call, not a sentence you broadcast to 200,000 live viewers who are watching your leverage evaporate in real time. Tell the artist the world stopped waiting on the second album 2 years ago. Tell the artist that Meg, Latto, GloRilla, Sexy Red, and Ice Spice are not slowing down and are not waiting on Cardi to catch up. Because the industry is watching. And the industry doesn't forget. And the industry has receipts even longer than mine. Now let me swing this back to the bigger cultural moment, because our girl is a case study, not just a target. There is a class of celebrity right now that was minted in a specific window, roughly 2015 to 2019, when brand budgets were bloated, streaming was still figuring itself out, and one viral moment could carry an artist for 3 years without a follow-up. She is a graduate of that window. So are a handful of her peers. So are a wave of pop stars who parlayed a single hit into a decade of touring. That entire class is now being audited by an industry that no longer has infinite money to spend. The brands are cutting deals in half. The labels are demanding release schedules. The streaming platforms are prioritizing catalog volume over legacy names. The playlist editors are getting younger. The ANRS are getting picker. The tour promoters are getting stingier. And the fans, the actual fans, are learning that they can build their own stars now, in real time, on TikTok and YouTube, without ever going through the industry gatekeepers at all. That means the ground under her feet is moving. And she can either move with it, or she can keep standing on a live stream telling us what she thinks she's worth while the ground finishes shifting. Point blank, this is the moment where legacies get decided. Not the tour. Not the album. Not the beef with Nicki that will trend for the 15th time next month. This moment. The one where Cardi B decides whether she is going to sit in the room with the paper, or whether she is going to keep telling us on Instagram Live that the room is beneath her. That decision is the whole ballgame. And that decision is being watched by people whose signatures determine the next chapter of her career. Every executive in her orbit is currently deciding whether to raise her, hold her, or quietly move on. That decision does not get made by a live stream. That decision gets made by output. I have my opinion. You know I have my opinion. But I want to hear yours. Do you think the European leg is genuinely done, or is this a public negotiation tactic that ends with a surprise announcement 3 months from now? Do you think she is ducking the studio, or is she quietly working on something she just doesn't want to preview? Do you think the label is lowballing her, or do you think the label is protecting itself from a run that wouldn't recoup? Do you think Offset was telling the truth, or do you think he was talking out of anger? Do you think the fans are being loyal, or do you think the fans are being taken for granted? Do you think the next Cardi B album is on the horizon, or do you think we're about to see the pivot to acting, cosmetics, or reality TV? And most importantly, if you are one of her fans, and I know a lot of you are, what is the honest thing you would say to her right now if you could get her on the phone for 2 minutes? Drop that in the comments and I promise I'm reading every single one of them, because y'all's takes on these threads are always sharper than half the takes on the podcast circuit. Now, one more thing before I close, because there is a subplot in this story that I don't want to leave on the cutting room floor. Her most recent public entanglements, the on-again off-again with Offset, the brief and headline-grabbing chapter with Stefon Diggs, the flirtation cycle that has kept her name in the tabloids for the entire duration of this so-called studio drought, those entanglements are not incidental. They are the schedule. That is where the calendar is going. That is where the daytime activities are going. That is where the energy is going. And it is not the culture's job, and it's not our job on this channel, to police anybody's personal life. But it is completely fair to point out that a rapper who has publicly admitted she's ducking the studio is currently, publicly, spending her time in every other way except in the studio. When the personal life is louder than the discography suffers. When the discography suffers, the touring pipeline dries up. When the touring pipeline dries up, the European offers get smaller. And when the European offers get smaller, we end up right where we are, on a live stream, on a Tuesday, listening to a Grammy-winning rapper tell us she deserves more. That is not a slander. That is subtraction. That is the mathematical consequence of the choices she has made in the last 24 months. That is not commentary. That is arithmetic. If the studio is not on the calendar, and the tour is not on the calendar, and the album is not on the calendar, and the features are not confirmed, and the brand deals are shrinking, and the European leg is dead, the question is not, what is she doing? The question is, what is she doing for a living, going forward? And that is a question every artist in her lane is eventually forced to answer, one way or another. Every single one. There are no exceptions. Every rapper who ever stood in an arena eventually has to answer the question of what happens when the arena empties out. Every crown wobbles. Every era ends. The only variable is what the artist builds before it does. Some of them answer it by getting back to the music. Some of them answer it by pivoting to acting. Some of them answer it by building a beauty empire. Some of them answer it by disappearing quietly and reinventing under a different chapter of their life. Some of them answer it with a Vegas residency. Some of them answer it with a Netflix documentary. Some of them answer it with a return to Broadway. Some of them answer it with a memoir. Some of them answer it with a fashion line. All of those are valid outcomes. What is not a valid outcome is broadcasting your frustration to a live stream and expecting the industry to raise the offer. That has never worked. That will never work. That is not how this business functions, and it is not how this business has ever functioned. Not for Whitney. Not for Mariah. Not for Britney. Not for Nicki. Not for Beyoncé. Not for anybody who ever tried it. And it will not work for Cardi B either. Because, and this is my last hard line of the day, the industry does not respond to broadcasts. The industry responds to leverage. And leverage is built in silence. Leverage is built in the studio, on the road, in the trenches, in the meetings, in the mix. Leverage is not built in the caption box. Leverage is not built in the comments. Leverage is not built in the live stream. Leverage is the receipts on the table when the meeting starts, not the sob story on the phone when the meeting ends. Leverage is what happens when the artist decides to compete instead of complain. If she remembers that, and she has remembered it before, because the version of her that made Bodak Yellow understood it in her bones, then the European leg comes back, the number goes up, and this entire moment becomes a footnote in a much longer comeback story. If she doesn't, we're watching a very public unraveling of one of the biggest hip-hop stars of the last decade, and we're all going to have to talk about it, again and again, until the story finally settles. And I don't want that story. I don't want to sit on this channel a year from now and tell y'all, I told you so. I want to sit on this channel a year from now and tell y'all, Cardi B ran it back and shut every critic up. That is the version of this story I am rooting for. That is the version this fanbase deserves. That is the version the culture needs. Either way, we'll be here. Either way, I'll be reading the receipts. Either way, y'all know where to find me. Before I close this out, let me leave you with one last thought, and this is the part you're going to want to sit with. Every superstar who ever survived a rough patch survived it because somebody in their inner circle told them the truth. Not the flattery. Not the fluff. Not the, you're the greatest of all time, ignore the haters, speech. The truth. A manager who told them the numbers. A best friend who told them the schedule. A producer who told them the beat wasn't ready. An assistant who put the phone away. She needs that voice right now. She needs somebody in that room to close the ring light, turn off the phone, and ask her one question. Sis, is the live stream getting you closer to the album, or is it getting you further from it? And if the answer is what we all suspect it might be, then the next move is obvious. Book the studio. Cancel the live stream. Turn off the notifications. Deliver the album. Rebuild the leverage. Watch the offers come back on their own. Because they will. That is the mechanic. That is the machine. That is the way this thing has always worked, and that is the way this thing will always work. She does not need the industry to change its mind about her. She needs to give the industry a reason to change its math. And the only place you can change the math is behind a microphone with the red light on. Not on Instagram. Not on TikTok. Not on X. Behind a microphone. In a room. With the door closed. And the beat playing. Let me leave one more receipt on the table before we get to the closer, because this is the part that separates the fans from the analysts. Every single female rapper Cardi B is publicly graded against has, in the last 36 months, done one specific thing that Cardi B has not done: they have shipped. Nicki Minaj shipped Pink Friday 2 and toured it to 5 continents. Megan Thee Stallion shipped Megan and stayed on the road. Latto shipped Sugar Honey Iced Tea and never left the promo cycle. Doja Cat shipped Scarlet and its sequel and rebuilt her image mid-run. GloRilla shipped Glorious and turned a mixtape run into a Grammy nomination. Sexy Red shipped, toured, and dropped a follow-up before the first one cooled. Ice Spice shipped, pivoted her sound, and shipped again. That is the peer group. That is the actual rate card. Every one of those women has been in the booth on the exact same calendar Cardi B has spent avoiding it. And that is the receipt that hurts the most, because it is the receipt that cannot be spun. Output is output. Silence is silence. And the industry is grading on delivery, not on charisma, not on personality, not on the size of the fan base, and certainly not on live stream monologues about deserving more. Let me close with one final receipt. Because everybody watching this needs to hear this one out loud. This is the exact same industry that watched Rihanna step away for nearly a decade and still hand her a Super Bowl stage on her way back. This is the exact same industry that watched Beyoncé retreat, re-strategize, and return with the biggest tour in the history of live music. This is the exact same industry that watched Nicki fight for every inch of her lane for 15 years and finally recognize her legacy. This industry is not the enemy. This industry rewards the artists who deliver, and it forgets the artists who explain. Cardi B does not need a new industry. Cardi B needs a new schedule. And the schedule starts in the studio. Because none of what I just said is punishment. All of what I just said is opportunity. Cardi B is one strong body of work away from erasing this entire news cycle. One album. One tour reset. One press run done right. That is the entire distance between the version of the story we are watching now and the version we could be watching by the end of next quarter. That is not a fantasy. That is arithmetic. And every artist reading this, because I know artists watch this channel too, should be writing that sentence down. Output erases narrative. Every single time. Without exception. Since the beginning of the industry. That is where the story turns. That is where the European leg gets resurrected. That is where the number goes up. That is where the run begins again. That is the only door with a light behind it. And the door is not locked. It is just unopened. I hope she opens it. I really do. Because when she is on, when the pen is sharp, the delivery is confident, the personality is unfiltered, and the beat is right, there is not a female rapper alive who can outrun her in her lane. Not right now. Not on the numbers she is capable of. Not on the moments she is capable of. The problem is not her ability. The problem is her calendar. Fix the calendar, and the rest of this conversation disappears within a business quarter. If this breakdown gave you something to think about, do me the favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell so the algorithm actually shows you the next one, and drop your honest take in the comments. If you're new here, welcome to the family. If you've been rocking with me since day one, you already know the vibe. Share this one with the group chat that argues about Cardi B every single week, because we both know that group chat is about to have a lot to say about this one. I'll see you in the next drop. Stay sharp. Stay honest. Stay tapped in.